the number one thing that SPECT needs are sterile processing professionals who are aware of what we're doing and want to stand behind us because they're from the profession. They know how important it is more than anyone else. They know that patients' lives are in their hands just as much as everyone else involved in providing surgical care. And it's so disheartening to know that many countries in the world don't recognize it yet as an essential component.
What if one conversation could save a life? What if one new process or new product could save a patient from surgical harm? Broadcasting from a hospital basement near you, you are listening to the Beyond Clean podcast, the global voice of sterile processing. Each week we spotlight the best practices, products and people from around the world who are disrupting our profession and helping you fight dirty. Every instrument, every time. Join us as we have the kinds of conversation that matter and give our industry the kind of voice that it deserves. Nyt on aika mennä puhdastakin puhtaammaksi. And now it's time to go beyond clean.
This week on Beyond Clean, we speak with Christina Fast, founder and executive director of SPECT. SPECT is the Sterile Processing Education Charitable Trust, an organization that provides sterile processing training and mentorship to healthcare workers in resource-constrained countries. Christina has worked in the sterile processing field for over 10 years with 7 years of teaching experience. She was named 2018 Isham Educator of the Year and one of Calgary's 2017 Top 40 Under 40 to make a difference. She has worked with SPECT in 14 countries throughout Africa, Central America, and Southeast Asia. And honestly, Hank, no surprise getting 2018 Isham Educator of the Year. Would love to see her win it again one of these days.
I'll tell you what, I am honestly okay admitting that I'm a super fan of everything that SPECT is doing. It just seems like such a great organization. I am excited to learn more about it on this interview because even though I see what they're posting on social media, I've read the blogs and the news stories, I don't really understand the true scope and the ultimate impact in the field that this group is making. So hopefully, along with our listeners today, we can really get into the weeds and learn about this terrific mission and organization.
As a reminder, you can subscribe to Beyond Clean on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and Spotify, or search for Beyond Clean on your favorite podcast application. We can also be heard on the Sterile Education app, available on iTunes and Android. Follow Beyond Clean on Twitter at Beyond Clean Info, Facebook.com/Beyond Clean Podcast, LinkedIn.com/company/Beyond Clean, or Instagram Beyond Clean Podcast. Find our videos, including Fighting Dirty with Hank Balch, Real Talk with Bob Mars, and Beyond the Headlines with Mike Matthews at youtube.com/Beyond Clean. Beyond Clean also offers social media and podcast consulting for vendors, along with survey preparation and remote consulting services to hospitals, surgery centers, and clinics. For more information, email info@beyondclean.net. Finally, Beyond Clean is moving to a new format for issuing CE credits for our podcast. Beginning this season, we will be certifying the entire season of 8 episodes all in one. That means just one quiz at the end of the season for all the credits on one certificate. We'll be right back after a short break.
You're listening to Beyond Clean, the global voice of sterile processing.
Joining us now is Christina Fast, founder and executive director at SPECT. And Christina, we're really excited to have you on the show. I know you had a chance to meet Hank at the World Congress, which is really exciting. And hopefully I'll get to go next year because I can't tell you how many great people that he's met. Mm-hmm. And I know you have a background with Mercy Ships, and we've done an interview with that organization in the past. I think it goes all the way back to season 1, but you've got a whole nother level here, and I think it's just a great story that needs to be shared with all of our listeners. And so we're excited to have you on it and take a deep dive. Thank you for sharing your mission with us.
Thank you, Justin and Hank. I'm really excited to be here and talking more about SPECT.
So I said, thank you for sharing your mission, but you haven't really done that yet. So let's Let's start at the beginning. Why don't you tell the mission of SPECT for everybody to get familiar with what we're talking about today?
Yes, SPECT's mission, to be honest, it changes often since there's a lot of experience or new experiences I'm having through every year, and we're really pioneering something new, being the only charitable organization out there providing sterile processing education and training and mentoring in low and middle income countries. So our primary mission is to improve sterile processing outcomes, and we do this by providing comprehensive training programs.
So training is something that we obviously love talking about. And as a matter of fact, last week's episode was specifically around formalizing training and onboarding and putting a really structured environment together for that so that we don't take shortcuts. Can you talk a little bit more about that training?
I've created a training program based off of World Health Organization recommendations, and also using the recommendations from Johns Hopkins charitable organization JPIGO. They have written a really great manual for low-income countries specifically with methods that can be used in settings that are resource constrained. So SPECT's training program is very context specific. It changes for every country that we've worked in because we've learned that there's not one training program that can accommodate every country, where the countries don't yet have standards in place. So if there's no national guidelines, there's little accountability, there's no standard operating procedures, it makes it very difficult to reinforce higher standards. So what we do is provide training that is specific to what the Ministry of Health or the hospitals that we partner with, what their administration is asking for. So that's where our pre-assessment comes in. We meet with the employees in the hospital who are currently doing the reprocessing. Then we talk to hospital administration, and we identify their main areas of concern and the gaps in their ability to provide safe surgical care. So the training right now generally consists of 9 PowerPoint presentations that are taught through a classroom course. And along with that, we do practical hands-on training, which includes teaching healthcare workers how to perform effective hand hygiene, how to put on and take off personal protective equipment, how to manually clean their surgical instruments, as well as inspection, assembly, function testing, wrapping. We do a lot of theory and practical components together, and that's what we found to be most effective. Along with that, though, we found that the training is only as effective as the support to implement changes afterwards. So teaching something, as we know in the classroom, it's easy for people to learn something new quite often, or to memorize something new, but practically applying it in their department is the greater challenge. So our program has been successful because we spend the time helping healthcare workers adapt the knowledge that they gain throughout the training, the classroom component of the training, and working with them in their departments to apply, to help them to link the knowledge to the practice, and in essence are part of our comprehensive training program.
Yeah, that's great, and it confirms the universal challenge of applying what you learn, right? So it's
Exactly.
it's not just a U.S.-based challenge, global challenge, which we could have assumed, right? Yeah. And so, Christina, let's talk about numbers for a little bit. Could you give us a little scope into the year that SPECT was founded, and then also the numbers that you have touched as far as training, countries, et cetera?
Yeah, definitely. So SPECT was founded in 2011. We received charitable status in 2013 in Canada. And for anyone listening in the U.S., we also have a 501c3 status in the United States that we got in 2015. So we primarily worked in Africa throughout many countries in the continent from 2011 up to the end of 2018. And at that point, we expanded to 2 other continents. So we've now worked in 14 countries across 3 continents. We have trained over 1,100 healthcare workers from over 200 healthcare facilities. And those healthcare workers have been trained as trainers. So the amount of people that they have gone on to train in their own facilities, we've lost count of, which is a good thing. We follow up, we do monitoring and evaluation, and we try to track as many numbers as we can. But we're happy and we're confident in saying those 1,100 people we have trained have received quality training, and we can stand behind their knowledge and their skill base in training others in their healthcare facilities.
Wow, awesome. So in the interview that we did that focused on the Mercy Ships ministries, like one of the things that we really focus on is what is life like on the ship, right? So like we're familiar with sterile processing in a hospital setting, et cetera. So like we really focus on that interview on that. But in this context, and you talked about it a little bit in the introduction, but can you maybe push back against some of the misconceptions that you have heard as you're talking to folks about the ministry, about like what they think these facilities look like, what they think the people are like who work in these sterile processing departments, maybe push back against that with what the reality is in the field?
Yeah, I think it's important to clarify a little bit. Mercy Ships is a partnering organization of SPECT. So the SPECT came about through my volunteer experience with the organization, but since we became our own organization, they've become one of our partners. So we do go back to the ship, and Mercy Ships has, in comparison to the countries we work in, state-of-the-art equipment and departments. So SPECT, in our partnership agreement, we've developed a program proposal, and that's through the medical capacity building department with Mercy Ships. So they're doing a lot of great capacity building work in local hospitals. I think when I use the word resource constrained, the things I'm referring to are poor infrastructure where water may not be available. There's electricity shortages. There are limited resources in resource constrained areas. There's medical supply companies all over the world, and both of you and myself have met many reps who work for supply companies and are familiar with a lot of brands of equipment, cleaning equipment, as well as mechanical equipment. In the countries that SPECT has worked in and provided training to, there are medical suppliers, but because sterile processing or that area of healthcare is not even recognized as a key department or as an essential department in some facilities, there are no supplies. And it's not that they cannot be made available, but that hospital administration and even ministries of health have yet to be told or have yet to understand what they're missing and why it's needed to make a case to medical suppliers of brushes and water-resistant gowns and detergents and things that ensure their instruments can be safely reprocessed to extend the lifespan of them. So they're resource-constrained are settings that they don't have that type of equipment yet. I think the misconception then for people to think, well, if they don't have resources, how can they do much? For the first 3 years that I had started SPECT, I didn't have resources. So I was teaching in local hospitals and I was teaching them to use what they had. What we found through this, I have a good example. In Guinea, West Africa is the second country I visited in Africa. It's next to Sierra Leone. I was just forming the vision for SPECT, and I went to a local, actually the largest hospital, capital Conakry. I went to the department, and I spent a week cleaning the sterile processing department with the 3 men who were responsible for reprocessing instruments. They had never received training, theory or otherwise, on what they were doing. They were hired and they were paid $5 a week by the surgeon to reprocess instruments, and they were paid in cash at the end of the week because they were not considered an essential component to surgical care. I went in, walked in the door because I didn't know anyone, and I just started cleaning the department. It hadn't been cleaned in over 30 years. So there were rodents, deceased rodents, there were insects, there was layers and layers of grime, there were needles, used needles and scalpel blades hidden all over the department, as well as piles of garbage. As I started cleaning, the men working in the department were going about their jobs. They didn't want to get involved until they started noticing a difference. So I had removed all the garbage. I had used their own supplies, or what they did have, which was laundry powder and chlorine. And I would scrub their surfaces, their countertops. And then I would show them, look, this is the difference. This is what it can look like. As I did that, I would talk to them about the importance of environmental cleaning, about what they needed to do their job, how important their job was. And they became interested and encouraged by seeing the results. So eventually they started working with me. And then a few days passed where I wasn't able to go to the hospital, and I would go back and more cleaning would be done. And there was progress. And in my mind, I still had reservations because of misconceptions that people have and had instilled in me. And even at that time, to say, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. You can't. How do you expect someone to make changes when they don't have anything? And so that thought was in the back of my mind. But I had seen some progress. I wanted to follow that through. And I knew I was coming back to Canada, and then I was going to return to Guinea 3 months later. I gave them 3 tasks to continue with. One, to keep the garbage off the floor, to keep instruments off the floor, and to perform environmental cleaning on a regular basis. They didn't know when I was coming back. They just knew I was going to return sometime that year. So 3 months later, I went back. And before going to the department, I talked to other employees in the department. And I asked them, for reference, I asked them what they thought of the department, if it was maintained. And their responses were positive. And then I did go to the department, and it was sparkling clean. It was exactly as I had left it. Because of that experience, it encouraged me and motivated me to continue going with SPECT. It proved some of the misconceptions that I had in the back of my mind, and I know other people had as well. It proved them wrong. It was one of the monumental moments or fundamental moments, and the reason that SPECT has grown, because I could see that there was a difference, and I felt like I could continue making a difference, and we have.
Now, speaking of making a difference, y'all have got a couple of big projects on the horizon, and one in particular coming in Uganda. I was wondering if you could give us a little spotlight on what the plan is on that particular project.
We'll be working in Uganda starting February 2020. So we haven't worked in that country yet. We have a new partner called Full Soul, and they're also Canadian-based. They're focused on maternal health, and they've established great relationships with the hospitals in and around Kampala. So Full Soul is partnering with 10 hospitals, and they, along with SPECT, have received a grant through Global Rotary Club grant to fund maternal kits, so surgical instrument kits for midwives who are delivering babies and don't have instruments when they need them in emergency situations. And SPECT will be providing training to not only the midwives, but also the other healthcare workers who are reprocessing instruments in these 10 hospitals. We'll be there in February, and we're quite excited to begin that program.
Awesome. Well, so I know that there are going to be folks listening to this interview who are sterile processing professionals themselves, or companies and organizations who are like, wow, this is a terrific mission. They're doing work that, as you said, very few folks in the industry have the focus and the skill set to do well. And they're asking themselves, how do I get involved? What would it look like for me to get involved? What do you need most? I asked you that when I first met you in the Netherlands. You're like, what can we do to help get this mission forward? So what would you say to those folks in SPD and then outside on how they can best help SPECT?
Yeah, the question doesn't get easier for me to answer because I know what we need, and I'm not a business person, so it's hard for me to discuss the subject of funding. The number one thing that SPECT needs are sterile processing professionals who are aware of what we're doing and want to stand behind us because they're from the profession. They know how important it is more than anyone else. They know that patients' lives are in their hands just as much as everyone else involved in this providing surgical care. And it's so disheartening to know that many countries in the world don't recognize it yet as an essential component to continue growing capacity, which is what we need. We need people involved, but not necessarily on a volunteer basis, because we need staff to grow and to have people who can invest in the organization that are going to be with us to help build on what we're doing. And that being said, we definitely have spaces for volunteers, but the best thing that anyone looking to volunteer with us could do is to represent our organization through fundraising or advocation, and to reach out to us and to talk to us about ways that we need support, not to look at it as an opportunity to volunteer and go overseas, because that could be viewed as another misconception. And one of the things I love about social media is that we get inspired by seeing so many beautiful photos and posts that are uplifting. The reality is the work that SPECT is doing is not glamorous. There's a lot that's not seen, and it's not for the faint of heart. But we rely on sterile processing professionals to reach out to help us grow our community, and that could be through advocation, through helping to fundraise, to networking with vendors for supplies, helping with educational materials. There's lots of ways they can get involved just from being at home if they're not looking to go overseas, and if they are really looking to help with providing training in the countries we work with. We have volunteer opportunities overseas and national volunteer opportunities on our website.
So that's a great point. And as Hank said, one of the first questions he asked you is, how do you get support? How can we help you get support? And that's really what we strive to do at Beyond Clean. If we really look at one of the biggest roles we're trying to play in the industry is to just get more awareness and get more support around lots of great initiatives. But yours is a really special one. And so I know you said that people can get to the website and that's how they can get involved, but maybe give them the website information, any email contact. We really want to encourage people, if they're listening to this, the best thing that they can do is just open up their email or pull up their phone and send an email and just take that first step. And so we don't want them to wait or say, I'll do it when I get home. You really want to ask them to do it right now. So how can they access you?
Yeah, when this podcast airs, our new website will be live. Our website IP will be the same. It's SPECT, but with an RUST, so SPECT, RUST.org, spectrust.org. That's our website address, and there's an easy, simple way to donate, both if you're from the U.S. and Canada. You're able to get a tax-deductible receipt by hitting the donate button. And our email is right there as well. I can easily be reached at hello@spectrust.org. And that goes directly to myself. And if I'm not able to answer it, there's someone else who will do their best. But we're more than happy to connect with anyone interested in our work, with anyone who has ideas or thoughts on how they want to get involved and how we can make a bigger difference together.
Well, I know we didn't get to everything that we could talk about with your mission and the work that you're doing tonight. And maybe we'll look at another time to go into maybe even some just great stories, right? Diving into some unique experiences from the field, and also to get people, to know what they might be encountering, right? If they get involved. And so we'll be looking forward to that. But I wanted to thank you for coming on the show. And I hope that people that are listening understand how important this mission is and how everybody else can help.
Yeah, I agree. And thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure, and I really look forward to a number of other podcasts with you guys.
Well, keep up the good work, and we'll definitely be in touch for future episodes. That was Christina Fast, founder and executive director at SPECT, talking about the Sterile Processing Education Charitable Trust. And we've had a number, I'd say this is the third guest that we've had on a Beyond Clean podcast, Hank, that has done work for other countries that don't have the resources that we have here in the United States, but even many of our other global listeners that are in countries that have good health care, lots of funding, access to resources. Obviously, there's a big need out there. And it's one that's just – it's a heavy lift. It's going to take a lot of people. And so anything that we can do to really get that word out, I think, is important.
Oh, that's right, Justin. And that's why I love asking folks who are in the field doing the hard work and the heavy lifting, like you said, how can we help? Because as a podcast that reaches countries around the globe, thousands and thousands of downloads a month, we reach out into folks who can hear a show like this and have the time, the opportunity, the funding to respond in a way that can help this go even further and reach even more folks in the field and ultimately guard and protect even more patients in these countries. And that's where we want to be. That's the whole purpose of the podcast, as you mentioned. And I'm just delighted that we were able to do that again with this interview.
All right, well, that's going to do it for this week's show. As a reminder, you can help support us by subscribing to Beyond Clean on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and Spotify. We'd certainly appreciate a rating and a review because your feedback is important to the show. And if you have any topics that you'd like us to cover on a future episode, or if you'd like to share a picture anonymously on our Instagram page, just send an email to info@beyondclean.net. On behalf of Hank and myself, thank you for listening to another edition of Beyond Clean.